Rob.
Hello everyone and welcome to Rob's Rogues and the Batman universe. Today we're taking a look at DC Comics designer series, the Grey Capullo line, and the chilly, icy Mr. Freeze. I don't know why I felt need to do that, but this is figure number 7 in the line. The new 52 version of Mr. Freeze does differ a little bit in personality from the pre-New 52 and the animated series where Paul Dini wrote a wonderful backstory for Mr. Freeze and really brought some heart and humanity into the character. As much as I love Scott Snyder, he did tweak Mr. Freeze's history and origin just a little bit. In the old continuity, Mr. Freeze basically became a villain because of an accident as he was trying to save his wife from a disease and put her in a cryostasis. So a lot of his crimes had to deal with technology that was going to try and save his wife, and it kind of made you sympathize, like there would be no means to the end of the earth that I wouldn't try and fight, borrow, beg, and steal to save my wife. It kind of made Mr. Freeze an endearing kind of character. Scott Snyder came along and tweaked it a little bit, and you still got the sense that he was trying to save his wife, Nora, which later you find out that Mr. Freeze was never actually married. He was just stalking this woman called Nora. So a little bit of more of a twisted thing, and Victor, as a child, had killed his own mother, pushed her into an icy lake. I'm going to put some images that'll go through at the end of the box portion of it. So a little bit different. I'll probably talk a little bit more about Mr. Freeze throughout the review. But the new version, I like it, but that now classic Paul Dini version of Mr. Freeze I still think is the way to go, but I like this design. So enough of that. Let's get into look at the packaging. As we said, this is figure 7 in the line, and I like this packaging for DC figures right now. I think it's pretty cool. I believe Batman's, I don't know why I'm pointing this out, but Batman, Riddler, and the Talon and Nightwing, their name was actually a sticker here. I think you could have peeled it off. I don't have their boxes in reach right now at the moment as I'm trying to look and find them. No, can't find them. But this is actually printed on. I don't know why it's noteworthy. It doesn't do anything different to the package. But gone is the sticker that would be normally here. And in the back are some other shots from figures that are in this particular wave of figures. Nice blue background and color scheme for Mr. Freeze himself. Here is some art from Grey Capullo. Grey Capullo hasn't drawn Mr. Freeze very much, along with the Catwoman that's currently in this line. They have only appeared in 1 or 2 issues, but it does represent the Grey Capullo art very well. The other figures in the line, we have a Red Hood that comes with 2 alternate heads. We have Catwoman that only comes with 1 extra head, or not 1 extra head, just the main head. Originally, she was supposed to come with 2 heads, but after seeing Olivia's review, DC, for some reason, decided not to give a second head. I think it was just because the head didn't look as good. Of course, we have Mr. Freeze and Thrasher suit Batman, which I thought I was going to pass on, but I really kind of want the figure now, and I really kind of want it basically for the Bruce Wayne head. I wonder how easy it would be to take off the Bruce Wayne head and throw it on the Red Hood body, and then you would have a suited Bruce Wayne. Granted, he's got white gloves, but a little bit of paint could change that. We don't get a Bruce Wayne very often. If we do, it's just the head of a Bruce Wayne. So anyway, what we're going to do, we will get Mr. Freeze out of the package. This is one from the line that once they made the announcement that they were doing Mr. Freeze, I had to pick him up. Mr. Freeze has been a long time favorite villain of mine, and just a DC character in general. Again, because of the Batman animated series, and then through the Arkham video games, Mr. Freeze was done so very well. And in the New 52, at first, I was kind of upset about the origin change, but it was kind of working for me. He was tied into the Court of the Owls, and being that Scott Snyder was writing some really good stuff, I'm like, I'm going to give the origin a pass. So let's get a better look at this figure. Cannot wait to get this guy out of package. We will be right back.
Baby, it's cold outside. It's cold out there every day. What is this? Miami Beach? Not hardly.
Okay, here is Victor Freeze, aka Mr. Freeze. Some people have said he kind of looks like Icicle or Icicle Jr. a little bit with his blue skin a little bit. Again, that's a little bit more of a change in the comics that they decided to go with. I would think that if you fall into a vat or get sprayed with liquid nitrogen, not only probably would you die, but it may radically change your skin a little bit. So that's kind of the theory I'm going with. Again, it's comic books. You know, we're arguing about a a make-believe character here, but you know, they're very real to us. I do like this design of Mr. Freeze. One thing that some people denoted, he has a little bit, for a while he had like a spike in his hair, but I think this is a much better look. This is just what's left over of his hair, a little extra light here on our subject. So, again, I do like the look and the aesthetic look of Mr. Freeze. Gone is the big bulky suit, which again was kind of cool that this big suit is what's keeping him alive. But now that we're into 2014 and we're kind of streamlining some things a little bit, I would assume technology in this day and age would be a lot better to be able to sustain him a little bit more. So again, it's kind of, suspension of disbelief. He has this housing to be able to keep him frozen basically, but he's basically shirtless or short-sleeved. So I'm going to kind of go with it. I'm just assuming that with the dome on, that is keeping his breath and everything cold. I don't know if that's making any sense at all, but that's what I'm going with. Mr. Freeze's reimagining was in the middle of the Court of the Owls. It was actually in an annual of Batman that was tied into the Court of the Owls. So, aside from what you like of the new 52 version of Mr. Freeze, the sculpting work on this guy is absolutely fantastic. The detail, if I can zoom in here, on the pants, see all these tiny, tiny little holes. Each one of these holes had to be sculpted and put into place. I was kind of hoping that the liquid nitrogen canisters would be removable. They are articulated a little bit, as you can kind of see here. So these little end pieces do move, which is a nice touch. But I think something this small might have gotten lost. But he puts these in his guns, if you can kind of see them there. But just the detail work on this guy, I would not want to get kicked with these ice shoes at all. That would do some serious damage. And by giving him this sleeker suit, I think it makes him a little bit more agile. Not that he's going to be doing a bunch of backflips and everything like that to fight Batman, but he's not as clumsily and clunky, walking down the street where Batman could basically just be on a light stroll and catch up with him. So I like that. The annual for Batman in the Court of the Owls was really good. I recommend reading it. That's kind of what started to sell me on the new version of Mr. Freeze. So kudos to Scott Snyder. I'm not saying he's my favorite version, but I don't hate him at the same time either. So let's take a look at his accessories that he comes with. He comes with two. One is a very important accessory, the dome, the silver dome. That he would wear a silver dome, the clear glass dome. So as he's out and about in the hot weather, he could survive. So I haven't had a chance to put this on yet, but it should peg right down in. Very cool. So sometimes with some Mr. Freeze figures, the head is in a fixed position unless they do a trick where you swivel the torso and then the head moves left or right, but you aren't able to articulate it yourself. So it's kind of cool that you could take the helmet off and you can get the head to tilt up, down, or have him look in different directions and still be able to put the helmet on. So that is a really cool, clever touch. It's just a piece of plastic So you can see where it's seamed right there. So I would just suggest being careful just for the sake of being careful. But I was about ready to get into articulation there. And his gun. The gun is something, I like this gun, but it was hard to decide like how he holds it, because it looks like he could hold it from here and shoot it, you know, this way at you. There's a trigger here. So if I go back to the comics, I'm assuming that this is the main handle that you would hold on to. So he's kind of holding it like this. So he'd be shooting at you this way. So I believe that's how it is. That's how it is on the box art. But a really cool gun, and it's one of those that's not attached to him anymore. That's what the canisters are for. So this is something he could run out of, but he has his own little, you know, pant utility belt, as it were. So, and he does hold it rather well. I was monkeying with it just a little bit beforehand. So we put that in there. And if I move the arm, I think just right, I could get him to hold it. Maybe not as well as I would like to, but he can hold it that way. So it looks a little funny having this end out here. I don't know if he can hold it. It looks kind of silly that way. So this is, like, again, this is the way that it is on the package, and he holds it rather well there. So since we're on to everything else, I'm moving the figure all around. Let's take a look at the articulation of this guy. Remove the dome, hold your breath, freeze. So the head is on a nice ball joint, does move full 360. The chin does kind of get in the way a little bit here at the collar, but there's really not going to be a need that you're going to have to play the Exorcist and have the head spin all the way around. He doesn't look up hardly at all. It's kind of fixed in this position, just the way the neck is cut, but can look down decently, which I thought was a nice touch. The arms are on a nice ball and socket and rotate. So it goes all the way around, full 360, no hindrance. The little elbow braces, probably, or shoulder pads almost, probably regulate his temperature as well. It does turn at the bicep. It does hinder a little bit getting into the back part if you wanted to rotate it all the way around, so keep that in mind. Single bend at the elbow. Turns at the wrist, swivels, hinges at the wrist, which is kind of cool. He has a waist swivel, which is very, very cool. Does not get into the way of any of the hosing or canister tank on his back. And this is a nice soft rubber, so even if it does get hung up a little bit, it's got plenty of give. This was the cool part. Something new that DC Collectibles is doing, at least in this line, that the T-jointed hips that they have are a little bit different than the current line of the figures. So yes, there is the clear peg in here, but the way that it's designed is a little bit different. I don't know if you can see the housing in there. If I bring up, let's say, Nightwing here, that is all the farther Nightwing's legs are going to go apart. So you can see just from a little bit farther down the line, as we're doing, sorry for the shot, guys, Mr. Freeze can get into a lot more dynamic pose than what Nightwing can, just by the way that they designed the hips and the legs. So I think that's pretty cool. So legs can go forward and back just a little, not overly too much. Does have an upper thigh swivel, which mine's really kind of stiff. Oh, there we go. That one turned. That always scares the crap out of me when they turn for the very first time. Like I'm going to snap them right off. So they turn there. He has a double bend at the knee, which I thought was really kind of cool. So you can pose Mr. Freeze pretty good. He's probably right on par with Batman as far as posability, other than having the ab crunch. Has a rocker hinge and swivel at the boot, at the foot. So I appreciate what DC Collectibles is doing. They are really trying to up their game, and some people would say by them upping their game, they are kind of creating some problems, but I would rather them create a few problems and maybe the end result will be a really, really good figure. Let's take a look at some of the other figures that I have from this Capullo series.
I am sick and tired of snow cones.
All right, here are the Capullo figures that I have so far. We have the Talon, Riddler, Nightwing, of course, Mr. Freeze, and Batman himself. This has been a really great line of figures, deservedly so by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, both that they have their own line of action figures. I know DC Collectibles is still trying to work on a few things, and I know we want every single figure to be absolutely perfect, and I've had my fair share of hits and misses and little QC things, but sometimes I tell myself that these figures are being mass produced, so you could get the random clunker here or there, or something snaps off or breaks. Yes, that definitely sucks to have happen when you are, you're spending your hard-earned money on an action figure that kind of breaks right out of package. But like I always say, contact the place that you bought it, and first of all, say that it broke. And sometimes I'll go right to DC myself. Usually that's one of the first places I go. And they may tell me, well, go back to your point of origin of sale, or they will rectify the problem right there themselves. So I'm glad DC Collectibles, that is taking steps to make their action figures better, rather than get the old DC Direct figures that had very minimal articulation. I'm not a big articulated guy. I mean, it's cool to be able to get them to put them in figures, but if that means they're going to be falling over and not standing up, then I'm kind of like, maybe let's scale some of that back, or maybe I don't need all the ankle articulation. Just give me a foot that moves, maybe left and right, not the whole hinge thing, at least so they stand on my shelf. But I absolutely love the Capullo line of figures. I can't wait to see what they have coming out later this year. I'm really hoping that we will get the Robins. We've already have Nightwing here. Would love to see Damian, Red Hood, and Batgirl. Well, we're getting a Batgirl, but a Red Robin from the Capullo line as well. So next year's Robin's 75th anniversary, so maybe we'll get some Capullo Robin 75th anniversary figures as well.
What would you do for a Klondike bar?
Final thoughts for this figure. I absolutely love the figure. The sculpting is great. The articulation is really nice and solid. The cool little surprises that they're doing double jointed knees on some of them. The Riddler didn't, but with Nightwing, Talon, and Batman, and now Mr. Freeze having the double joints in the knees, I think that's a nice touch. The new hip and T-joint leg articulation is nice, so they're making a nice strides for the figure. And Mr. Freeze overall, it may not be my favorite origin of the character, but he is still one of my favorite Batman villains, and it works for the New 52. I'm not somebody that hates it and thinks, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I do really enjoy what they've done with the Mr. Freeze character, and it kind of updated him a little bit. Yes, I would like his wife to have actually been his wife, but that gives a little bit more menacing approach to Mr. Freeze. So today we've been taking a look at the Greg Capullo figure 7, I believe. Yes, the 7th figure from the Greg Capullo Designer Series from DC Comics. And as always, this is Rob for Rob's Rogues and the Batman Universe signing off, saying we will see you guys next time.
This helmet makes me chafe.